So we are now in the part 3 of this series of lectures under molecular basis of heredity. We have already taken up the first 6 topics, the last presentation being the discussion on gene, especially emphasizing the one gene, one uh, polypeptide theory, and then we ended up with the translation process. And we are now in the regulation of gene expression at various levels, and we will be taking this up uh, as far as prokaryotes and eukaryotes are concerned. So starting with prokaryotes, let's define some terms first. So we have an operon, which is composed of a cluster of genes, regulated, of course. This cluster of genes have related functions, and they are positioned like adjacent to each other. And there is a promoter there that will specify the binding site of transcription factors and also RNA polymerase. So the starting site of transcription. The operator is the sequence that is, or the segment that is located uh, close to the binding site of the um, transcription fact. The RNA polymerase. So the binding site of transcription factor itself. And then we have the regulatory genes that control whether the genes are going to be transcribed or not. We have repressor. The regulatory genes can code for a repressor, an inhibitor, or an inducer. So a repressor will obstruct RNA polymerase transcription, which means that it physically blocks the path of um, RNA polymerase. Inhibitor also has a negative effect, but the uh, gene may be uh, expressed at some other, the inhibitory effect might be expressed at some other distant gene. Inducer is a molecule that starts gene expression. So if it is present, it will promote transcription and thus gene expression. This is a typical prokaryotic gene, and you have here the sequences that are interrupted somewhere here, um, implying the fact that regulator or regulatory genes are located farther upstream relative to the location of the promoter and operator. So I would like to emphasize the fact that since genes in prokaryotes are clustered, they are going to be transcribed using starting at a single promoter. So for all genes, there's a single promoter, and thus we have the term polycistronic. So several genes clustered and transcribed along a single into a long single mRNA from one promoter. So take note of that because eukaryotes have a different structure there. This is control of gene expression at the level of transcription. In prokaryotes, that can occur in the negative or positive manner. So in this negative control, you have the physical obstruction of the path of RNA polymerase, this um, by a regulatory protein. So that is negative control. So because this is blocking the path of RNA polymerase, there will be no transcription. Whereas positive control will promote the transcription process. So the binding site of regulatory protein will be behind or at a site that will not obstruct the path of RNA polymerase. So to give specific examples in prokaryotes, negative transcriptional control systems are trip operon and lac operon. The trip operon is composed of a group of genes that are used and transcribed together, coding for the components for production of tryptophan. So this is for tryptophan synthesis. Although first described or characterized in E. coli are present in many bacteria. In contrast, lactoperon or lactose operon is a set of genes that code for transport and metabolism of lactose. And both of them are composed of several genes. Although not mentioned here, for trypoperon you have trip A to E, while for lactoperon you have the genes LAC-Z, Y, and LAC-A. This is the trypoperon. We have here a regulatory gene that codes for an mRNA that can be translated into a repressor, which is in an inactive state. By looking at its shape, so it's inactive because it is supposed to bind to the operator, but it's inactive, so it cannot bind because of this particular shape. So the promoter is here. So we have here the RNA polymerase. And because the repressor is inactive, the RNA polymerase can continue its job, and that is to transcribe all these genes. So this is the mRNA product, and these are the translation products. So in the absence of tryptophan, this particular operon is turned on. While in the presence of tryptophan, the inactive repressor is activated. So it's no longer inactive because of the binding of tryptophan to its active site here at the bottom. You have the change in shape of the repressor, thereby activating it and enabling it to fit into the operator and blocking the path of RNA polymerase. So that is an off tryptophan or trypoperon. The other one is the lactose operon, which we have mentioned before as an operon that is supposedly involved in the production of enzymes that will catalyze metabolism and transport of lactose. So when there is no lactose, we have the repressor here in its active form, uh, as it is translated from the LAC-I, and can bind to the operator, blocking the path of RNA polymerase and thereby inhibiting transcription. So, which makes sense because LAC operon will only work if there is lactose, but since it's absent, it should be turned off. Then, in contrast, in the presence of lactose, there is formation of an allolactose from lactose, which serves as an inducer that will bind to the active site on the um, repressor, changing its shape, making it unable to bind to the operator anymore, and making it possible for RNA polymerase to transcribe these genes. And out of this mRNA, we can have the enzymes beta-galactosidase, permease, and transacetylase. Beta-galactosidase is intended to catalyze the breakdown of lactose to glucose and galactose, while permease is responsible for its transport. Transacetylase is more on detox processes, something to do with lactose metabolism build up that can become toxic to the cell. So it will detoxify the cell. Then going to since both LAC and trypoperon are under negative control, we have here the positive control, which we have seen as something that is enhancing the activity of the RNA polymerase. So in this type of regulation, positive control. We can also use the lac operon as an example. Um, Low glucose can turn the lac operon on. So, glucose, being the primary source of energy, is a necessary material in the cell. But if glucose is low, or when glucose is low, there is an increase in the level of cyclic AMP. Mura siya alternative source of energy. So AMP being just derivative sa ATP. So cyclic adenosine monophosphate. High levels of CAMP, let's call it CAMP, can bind with CAP, that is catabolite activator protein, and form the CAMP-CAP complex that binds to a site or to the DNA sequence before the binding site, before the promoter, the binding site of RNA polymerase. And this binding will uh, enhance the binding of RNA polymerase and promotes high rate of transcription, followed by translation. So in the presence of all these enzymes, all three enzymes, there is now an enzyme that can break down lactose to glucose and galactose, addressing this low level here. So increased glucose, so the more of these processes, breakdown of lactose, leads to an increase in the glucose and later on achieving the homeostatic stage. So turned on siya until the problem is solved. In contrast, when glucose is high, there is a decreased level of CAMP because glucose is the immediate source of energy used by the cells. Hindi sila mogamit of alternative sources. So you cannot see much of the formation of CAMP-CAP complex. So there's no CAMP-CAP that will bind to this site before the promoter. So as a consequence of no binding of the CAMP-CAP to the sequence before the promoter, there is there is an inefficient RNA polymerase binding to the promoter, although it still binds, but at a very low uh, frequency, as well as it can do its job in a very slow manner. It's a low rate of transcription, and that means it will lead to diminishing production of glucose. And that will last as long as there is enough supply of glucose to power the cell's activities. In eukaryotes, we have the old representation of the gene called the Britton-Davidson model, or the gene battery model, which I have tried so hard to look for a colored version, but it seems that this is the only um, illustration that is available. So just like physics illustrations, you have here the sequences in the gene available there, sequences, and activators, and then very important characteristics of the eukaryotic gene is there is redundancy of receptor sites. So you can find receptors scattered among the structural genes, as well as integrator sites. So a lot of them. So there are 4 classes of sequences in the eukaryotic gene. The first one are the producer genes, equivalent to structural genes of the operon in eukaryotes. Each producer may have several receptor sites responding to one activator. So we have several genes involved there. Some activators can get involved in the same gene, but at different times. Then we have operator receptor site, or iba remember, redundancy of receptor sites. This is equivalent to an operator, and it is assumed to be adjacent to the producer. So the same arrangement as the prokaryotic. Integrator gene is the same as the regulator gene. So you have the product that can regulate or turn on or off the process. And then sensor site regulates the activity of um, integrator gene or regulator gene. This is the typical eukaryotic gene, refined version of the gene battery model. And it's laid out there in a linear form. You have there several sequences, just part of the promoter, and then you have the start of transcription. Take note that eukaryotes are monocystomic. There is only one promoter for each gene. So this is considered one gene, so one promoter. So if we are talking about several genes functioning towards the same process, contributing towards the same process, and they can be found on different chromosomes, and sayopin, they can be on different chromosomes, and they each of them have their own, each of them has their own uh, promoter. So the regulatory DNA sequences include, you have promoters, remember the binding site of transcription factors, um, followed by RNA polymerase 2. So these are the conserved eukaryotic promoter elements, conserved because throughout evolution they are still there. So this is the sequence, or these are the sequences for each. Then we have enhancers. So enhance. So when TFs or transcription factors bind to enhancers, they will enhance the transcription of that particular of the gene just beside it. So these are various pictures of transcriptional enhancers and how they are located associated sa other elements. Gene regulation in eukaryotes occur at several different levels. Uh, in the picture here, we have 6 levels. One is at the level of transcription, so control, like what DNA segments are going to be transcribed or what are not. So that has something to do with packaging or loosening of chromatin. Then second is RNA processing control. So how RNA is processed, should it become a mature mRNA or the other RNAs, or should it be kept inside the nucleus for a time, or should it be released? So kung released towards the cytoplasm, the transport and localization is also regulated, whether it should just go to the cytoplasm or to a specific portion where we can find specific organelles. Then we have mRNA degradation control. So when is the proper time to get rid of this mRNA? Because once mRNA is no longer useful to the cell, it should be degraded, or else it will just occupy space. So everything can get crowded. She should be degraded, and nucleotides can be recycled and used for something else. Then we have translational control. So what mRNA are going to be translated to a protein, or should it translation be stopped? So something like that. So pero pwede pa siya that once the protein is produced, it could be inactivated, or usually it's bound to another molecule, and then it will only become activated, removing that molecule that causes the inactivation once the cell needs it. So let's start with the transcriptional control. So transcription is controlled by proteins binding to the DNA regulatory sequences. So we have here the transcription factors, regulatory factors. So these are parts of transcriptional control because they will dictate whether RNA polymerase can proceed in its activity or not. Then what is shown here is the change in the shape of the DNA when it comes to allowing regulator proteins, even those located away from the actual gene that is being transcribed, to take part in the regulation. So these proteins, for example, are still able to interact with that mediator. This one is specifically for enhancer, but the same thing works like an enhancer. An enhancer can be are is usually located far, so that's why they are called distal control elements. Kani. Uh, the looping here can make these sequences get close to the assembly of proteins here that will mediate transcription. So same thing, that even if they are located far, they're still capable of doing their regulatory function. And with emphasis on collaboration. So transcription regulators can work as a committee. So it's not just a single sequence. It can be several uh, closely related sequences. And all of them are needed to achieve the uh, goal, and that is to allow transcription to begin. The packing of chromosomes will also uh, control transcription, because we know that transcription starts at the promoter. So if the promoter is located in the part of the DNA that is compact or not available, so this one definitely you cannot see in the near future that there could be transcription that can take place right away, especially this one. So kuan pa man, the location of the promoter is like hidden. But if they are going to be made available to the surface, or there are some modifications sa histone that can allow the initiation of transcription to take place. This one is a lot easier to imagine, because we know that loose chromatin is active chromatin. So you have there the remodeling of the nucleosome to allow transcription initiation. And here we have the role of hormones. Hormones being chemical like signals can also take part in controlling transcription. This is in the case of protein hormones. There is no, it's not allowed to enter the cell, but the mere binding to the surface can start a cascade of signaling events that can affect transcription. In contrast, the steroid hormone, being lipid in nature, can easily cross the cell membrane, the plasma membrane, and uh, associate with a receptor in the cytoplasm, become converted to the hormone receptor complex that can even translocate to the nucleus and dictate the process of transcription directly. Next, we have post-transcriptional. So we are through with transcriptional control. post-transcription. So we now have the product of transcription as shown here. This is DNA. Then after transcription, you have the pre-mRNA. So these are the series of steps in mRNA processing. But we will, I'll present this first. We have first the capping of the 5' end, followed by uh, splicing, excision of introns and splicing, and polyadenylation, or adding the poly A tail. So let's take each process separately. So this is mRNA processing. So number one is 5' capping, which is the addition of a 7-methylguanylate to the 5' end. Right after the start of transcription, this one will start the 5' capping, because exposing a little part of the 5' end of the mRNA will make it vulnerable to possible like damage caused by enzymes. So right away, it is capped. So that is protection. So with the pre-mRNA already capped, you can imagine it as like this. Next is polyadenylation. This is not the proper sequence as presented in the previous picture, but I'm just following up because we are looking at mRNA. So since we started with the 5', why not proceed to 3' end? So 3' polyadenylation. So here you have the binding of the CPSF, so cleavage and polyadenylation specificity factors on this site of the pre-mRNA, the AAUAAA, and then followed by binding of the CSTF, or cleavage stimulation factor, on the GU use end, and we have the CFs, or cleavage factors, which will help stabilize the assembly and then cause this looping of the mRNA, as well as cut, cleavage. So cut this portion, and that is still not complete. The binding of the poly A polymerase at the uh, at this site, adding this sequence. So the poly A tail here is just an additional sequence. It's not coming from the DNA. So it's not like part of what has been transcribed. We have also the PAB here, which are poly A binding proteins. So this is now the mature RNA and the finished product. So with complete protection on both ends. So protected from enzymatic degradation. Number 3 is splicing. This is the pre-mRNA before splicing. You have alternate exon and intron, exon. This is the end of an exon and the beginning of an intron. An intron. An intron has at the 5' end a GU. Take note that it's presented in bold letters to emphasize that it's a recognition site near 5' end, and we have another recognition site near 3' end, the AG there, and somewhere in between, A adenine at branch site. So these are the markers recognized by spliceosome for them to assemble. At by the way, introns are a lot longer than exons, while exons are like a few, a few, pwede hundreds of 50 to as much as mga 200 base pairs. Um, introns can extend up to 3.3 kilo base pairs. So they are a lot longer than exons. So going back to the cell splicing, we have identified the GU here at the 5' end, and there is a marker also at the 3' end, the AG, and somewhere in between the A. So those sites, recognition sites, are needed for the spliceosome to assemble and then form a loop. Spliceosome here, a large RNA protein complex. So you have the RNA, this one, and the proteins are the SNRPs, which are the small nuclear ribonucleic proteins, which are composed actually of small nuclear RNAs and about 6 to 10 proteins. So the assembly of these NERPs there, you now have the spliceosome. So that will include mRNA. So the looping will extend to the point na a lariat is formed, lariat-shaped, excised intern, and you now have two ends of the uh, exons spliced. So that is going to be occurring for each intron involved, for each intervening intron. Now the question comes there, why is it that we have so much introns? And I mentioned earlier that they are even longer than exons. So number one is protective. That reason alone, because if you have so much of the non-coding sequences, um, high probability for them to be hit by like mutation that can easily damage or impair the functionality of a gene if it's going to be an exon. So better an intern than an exon. Then number two, it gives the cell options as to how to splice the mRNA. So in various combinations, because there are several ways of splicing, as we will see later. Eukaryotic genes can be simple transcription units, so those that code for that encode a single protein, and complex transcription units, those that ang primary transcript, so we're talking about the mRNA, can be processed in alternate ways that can produce many different products. So this is alternative splicing. DNA after transcription. So uh, you can see the position of exons relative to introns. Alternative splicing could involve putting together all the exons in that particular order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exons, giving rise to protein A, or when translated becomes protein A. Or it could be only 1, 2, 4, and 5. So you have another protein, protein B. Or it could be 1, 2, 3, and 5. So protein C. So the second reason for having an intron, like where the splicing could take place. Like for example, 1, 2, 4, 5 for protein B. 1, 2, so we are going to connect the end of exon 2 with exon 4. So exon 2 is removed also. Then we have gene shuffling. And this one is demonstrated by recombination at the simplest level. But there have been shuffling that have taken place throughout evolutionary stages. So the shuffling that you can see here is like segments of genes represented in different colors are being transferred or shared with other genes so that you now have a variety of genes making up a DNA. So identifying a particular organism, for example. For clearer illustration of that, let's take a look at specifics, exon shuffling. So if gene 1 is represented by exons that are numbers and gene 2 exons are letters, recombination can create, so recombination or crossover can create a hybrid of number and letter exons. So, and letter and number. So you now have different combination, giving rise to variation. Okay, continuing with RNA processing. So some other processes, aside from those we have mentioned earlier, we have here nucleolytic cleavage, chain extension, and nucleotide modification. Nucleolytic cleavage involves separation of mature rRNA from the primary transcript. So using an activity that is catalyzed by another type of RNA polymerase, RNA polymerase 1. So the RNA that is generated can also be processed into another form of uh, uh, RNA. So mature RNA. Then we have chain extension. We have seen that in the polyadenylation, wherein PAP added uh, multiple A's to the end of the uh, mRNA. Another one is synthesis or regeneration of the CCA sequence. So if you notice, each tRNA has a CCA sequence at the 3' end, and that is conserved sequence. And that is also where amino acids bind. Of course, what amino acid will bind to that end will depend on what is displayed on the ribosome as the next code. And then nucleotide modification. You have the addition of certain chemical groups, like in the example here, methylation. So methylation of nucleotides in tRNA or RNA. Next, we have translational control. So this is now related to whether we allow translation to take place or not. This one is shows us the mRNA showing the AUG, which represents methionine or the start site of translation. For the first, for panel A, first picture there, AUG is exposed. The binding site is not involved also in any uh, complicated reactions, interactions. So protein synthesis is still possible. But if the binding site of the ribosome binding site of the mRNA is blocked by a repressor protein, no protein is made. Then panel B, AUG as well as the ribosome binding site perform base pairing with upstream sequences of the same mRNAs. Of course, no protein is made. But then these hydrogen bonds here can be broken by increasing the temperature, which will make them available to allow initiation of translation. Then this one is complicated in that there is several loops that can be found upstream to the part which it is going to be the starting point of protein synthesis. But then, since AUG and the ribosome binding site is not involved, are not involved, so protein synthesis can still start. But complication like this, there is looping, and then the binding site, ribosome binding site, as well as AUG is involved, and even stabilized by the presence of a small molecule, no, definitely no protein made. So this is the usual picture that we see of an mRNA that is ready for taking part in translation. But there is one more. But then an antisense RNA has sequences that are complementary with this part of the mRNA. So there is H bonding here that can make the AUG and the ribosome binding site not available. So no translation initiation. Here we have the role of some small regulatory RNAs in regulating genes. And we are introducing here the microRNA or miRNA. And here's the picture that shows you how mRNA can take part in that process. We have a precursor microRNA formed inside the nucleus, and once it is processed, it's processed into mature form, it's exported to the cytoplasm. So this is how it looks like after the cutting off of the loops at the end and some other sequences there. This is now the miRNA or micro RNA, which associates with risk proteins, risk um, forming the risk. So risk is RNA-induced silencing complex. Take note that the association of the single-stranded microRNA with risk protein will form the structure that looks like ribosome translating, which is not accurate because you know that our ribosome has two subunits. This is just risk. The role of this risk will be to search for an, an mRNA that has sequences complementary to the code carried by the mRNA. And here we have two possible matches. Extensive match if end-to-end na complementary. So in cases wherein this happens, mRNA is rapidly degraded. For this one, only a short portion, less extensive match, can base pair and form H bonds. So this one will work a little bit, pero ultimately destroyed. Then we have post-translational level. So we are showing here a picture of how the genome is uh, transcribed to form the transcriptome, then or the RNAs, then these are the products. Most translational modification are mostly via attachment of chemical groups. Like in this case, we have phosphorylation or addition of phosphate group. These are the most commonly phosphorylated amino acids in mammals. Or glycosylation or the addition of a carbohydrate. So usually they are intended to be transported to membrane systems. Like carbohydrate serves as markers to identify the protein, the cell type. So like for example, N-glycosylation, we have an N there to which this carbohydrate will attach. O-glycosylation, you have an O, that's the carbohydrate attached to it. Glycation, the COH is removed and the carbohydrate is replacing it. Then glycosylation, you have C, the carbon is glycosylated. Phosphorus, so you have participation of a phosphate in the glycosylation. Another one is ubiquitination. So addition of ubiquitin, specifically to lysine residues. This is a picture showing us for a protein that is for degradation. So it's going to be ubiquitinated um, in three main steps: activation, conjugation, and ligation, as shown in the picture, and requires three types of enzymes: E1, E2, and E3. So the enzyme will be E1 is ubiquitin activating, so that's why you have activation. So ubiquitin is activated there. Ubiquitin conjugating enzyme, so E2. And then E3, ubiquitin ligases. So the three enzymes there, you have the protein here that is ubiquitinated, and the ubiquitin is even uh, ligated to the protein, and it's now the protein that is labeled with it. And once a protein is ubiquitinated, that is said to be the kiss of death, because anything that is ubiquitinated is soon to be degraded, as you can see from here, degraded. Then we have addition of an NO, or nitric oxide, to sustain residues, that is S-nitrosylation. This is usually related to mga cell signaling, could be involved in mga brain functions or endothelial cells. Then methylation, adding of methyl groups. So again, commonly methylated amino acids. And terminal acetylation, addition of acetyl functional group to a protein. And the donor here is acetyl coenzyme A. We have lipidation, addition of lipid moieties to proteins. So the protein can be like for anchorage to a membrane by fatty acid, or also anchored to the membrane by fatty acid, some by prenyl groups, pero anchored to a membrane, which is common to membrane proteins. We have glycolipids as well as uh, glycoproteins. So these are types of lipidation, which you can just read out of the definitions, not necessarily for you to memorize, just to familiarize so that you will know sometimes how they derive these terms. And other types of post-translational modifications, not necessarily adding chemical groups. We have cleavage, protein cleavage, which now involves enzymes that are proteases generally. Like here, you look at the inactive form of proinsulin. It's a long polypeptide chain. It's inactive because A chain is joined to the B chain by the C chain, or the C peptide. And once activated, the C peptide is cut off. So this is now the active insulin. So that is the cleavage that we are talking about. And there are a lot of processes that involve this type of post-translational um, modifications. So as you look at this list here, you can read what those processes are. And okay, sometimes, a protein that is being translated by the ribosome expresses on the 5' end, um, not 5' end, not 5' end, the forming end, the amino terminus end has a signal peptide, which is recognized by a signal recognition particle that will guide it towards where it should be, where it should go. So intended for a particular membrane. Like this one, the signal recognition particle will guide the signal peptide to the ER membrane. So in the plasmic reticulum. And then once it translocates, okay, it will translocate across the membrane, the signal peptide is removed, and the finished polypeptide is now within the ER lumen. So that is now functional form. And I guess that's the last slide. And the next topic would be epigenetic gene regulation.